Glad to have you with us. We're back after the weekend. Hopefully, everybody had a great weekend. Uh, Enjoyed what was a terrible, terrible Super Bowl. Fortunately, it was a good betting night for me, Adam, because otherwise, I don't know how I ever could have sat through that entirety of that game. It was just brutal, but it was a good night betting, which is it really does take away from the terribleness of such an ugly game.
Yeah, I was pretty mad at myself pretty quickly for not having bet on that game. So I ended up pretty much like I was out at a bar watching it and I ended up basically just like talking to friends on Twitter more than I actually watched the game because it was just like as someone who doesn't care about like football and isn't going to enjoy a defensive matchup, it was brutal.
Yeah, and even so, like you could talk about a defensive matchup and the Patriots, Bill Belichick, and the defensive coordinator, who I think just took a head coaching job for the Dolphins. Like
Yep.
defensively, they were amazing, but Jared Goff, that's one of the worst performances I've ever seen in the Super Bowl, man.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was just terrible. But here we are, and it's over. Brady's got his sixth ring. They've been 9 Super Bowls in 18 seasons. It's just insane. But this is the NBA deeper dive. So enough of that. Let's jump right into it. We've got 6 games today. It is, of course, February 4th on Monday. And we'll start it off as we always do with the earlier games. We've got Atlanta and Washington. In Washington, kind of an interesting game, actually, especially depending on where ownership's going to fall. Washington 7-point favorites at home, 230 total. Hawks still over the last month playing at the second fastest pace in the league, Adam. But with this Washington team, you have guys like Otto Porter and Trevor Ariza so closely priced to each other. Last I looked at our ownership projections, Otto Porter, one of the highest owned players on the slate. Trevor Ariza, still relatively popular, but coming in about 10 to 12% lower than him. For example, on DraftKings right now, our projected ownership for Porter's 25%, the highest on the slate, while Ariza's at 18%. And on FanDuel, Otto Porter is the second highest projected owned at 29%, while Ariza is at 21%. And then you've got the Jeff Greens of this world. Let's talk about them before we get into the guards with Bradley Beal and Satoransky, because I think there's a lot to get to here.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that you should probably be paying pretty close attention to ownership on these guys because none of them are going to project a whole lot differently.
Right.
They're all going to play 34 to 38 minutes, somewhere in there. They're all obviously in a nice spot against Atlanta. Porter, moving to the starting lineup, it's good for his minutes, but you see his usage come down a bit, playing, more of his minutes alongside Beal. Ariza has been much better on a per minute basis, I think, than we expected since coming to Washington, which isn't really that surprising since Wall's out and you have Ariza taking on more of a role offensively. Jeff Green, his minutes are probably, or not probably, his minutes are definitely the least locked in out of that group of Porter, Ariza, and Green, but also gets an increase in usage coming off the bench. He's been playing a bunch of minutes at center. So, he has some appeal at a cheap price tag, especially if he's going to be much lower owned than them. It's just a really, really good spot. And then especially their DraftKings prices are all just really cheap across the board for this team. And even Thomas Bryant at 5K with Ford eligibility on DraftKings, there's a ton of risk in the minutes, but it's a great spot. And if he gets 24 to 26 minutes, he can be a pretty good play as well. So really paying close attention to ownership on these guys because I just really don't think there's a big difference between Porter and Ariza or between when you factor in price, Green either.
Yeah, I feel like Green is one where he'll probably go more overlooked than everyone else, but it's not like he can't play, above 30 minutes too. And on DraftKings, you're getting a discount on him, 4,900, Ariza 57, Porter 59. I think it is an ownership game because look, while I have no problem with Otto Porter here, it's the way I see it, Adam. And please, if you disagree, I'm happy to hear it. I don't think that Trevor Ariza is really any less, or that Porter is really any less risky than Ariza. I mean, yes, Porter is a better per minute player. I get it. But we know Ariza in a close game is going to play 38, 39 minutes. So he has that. Does Ariza have a lower floor? Probably, but he's also dropped the 40 plus fantasy point games. So is Porter. I don't think they're all that much different. So if we run our update on the projected ownership, and Ariza comes in like 15% under Porter, it's going to make my decision a little bit easier.
Yeah, I completely agree. Porter is obviously a good play. There's no question about it. It's
Hmm.
just that it's not a significantly better play than these other guys on the Wizards. And if he's going to be the highest owned guy on the slate or close to it, then there's probably just more of an edge in tournaments to having other pieces of this Wizards team, especially because we have seen too that in a lot of games recently where Porter is a good play and he's cheap, when he disappoints, it's normally because like Trevor Ariza gets hot or Satoransky gets hot, and these guys start knocking down threes. Jeff Green as well.
Right.
So it's when you have a bunch of guys on the same team, not only is it a good strategy to pay attention to the ownership as it would be anywhere, but you also get some leverage built in there because there's only going to be so many points from the Wizards, no matter how good the spot is, obviously. And if Ariza has a monster game, it increases the likelihood that Porter busts.
Right, exactly. What do you make of Thomas Satoransky? He played 24 minutes last game, but had been playing, 35 minutes in close games or more. We had seen that ever since John Wall went out. Satoransky, just looking at the numbers, is he a high per minute guy? No, and that's not something you should really expect from him. But look, 27% usage rate since John went down. 35 minutes in games decided by 10 or fewer points up until last game. Granted, that wasn't decided by 10 or fewer points, but some of the starters still played really big minutes. And he really, outside of Bradley Beal, you're talking about assist opportunities, touches, initiating the offense. Satoransky is getting that done. What do you make of his minutes here, though, against the Hawks team that, I mean, this is a bad Hawks team, and you're going to see a lot of Satoransky against Trae Young. Not to break down the individual matchups too much here, but Trae Young is a terrible defender, maybe the worst in the league in his rookie season. I'm just curious to see where the minutes are here. Chesson Randle and Jordan McRae saw combined 27 minutes off the bench last game. It's hard to think we'll see that again tonight, though.
Yeah, I mean, McRae wasn't really in the rotation. He played solely, I think, in the fourth quarter. He definitely didn't
Right.
play in the first half.
Well, they did play over 13 minutes, so you have to play a little bit in the third quarter.
Yeah, it was all second half run. I do remember
Right.
that. And Randall, yeah, he's been backing up Satoransky, but I don't want to read too much into his minutes being down because, obviously last game was a blowout. The game against Indiana was a blowout. And even the game against the Cavaliers, which ended up being a 3-point game, it was a blowout as far as it goes for Satoransky because Cleveland had a massive lead throughout that game. And then
He also had 3 fouls last game in the second quarter.
Right. Yeah. And I think he had 2 in the first quarter.
He did. That's what I'm saying. He had 3 fouls, meaning total.
Oh, gotcha.
3
Yeah,
fouls.
yeah.
He came back with about 8 minutes remaining, or 4 minutes gone in the second, played 4 minutes, caught that third foul, and then lost 3 minutes to close out the half.
Right. And also, if you just look at the rotation there, it was shorter than normal because he subbed out in the first with the 2 fouls and they didn't bring him back as early, probably because of the 2 fouls.
Sure.
So I'm really just not taking anything away from the minutes in these last 3 games. And prior to that, you were getting, 36 plus. Even if I project him for like 34 minutes on DraftKings, I get him as one of my highest owned players on the slate, especially with small forward eligibility in addition to point guard. If I give him 36 minutes, it just obviously gets even higher. So, I really, really like him a lot, as I do with everyone on the Wizards.
So do I, quite a bit. Satoransky is one of those guys that has disappointed in the past, no question. He's faced the Hawks 3 times this year, averaging north of a fantasy point per minute. For what that's worth, probably not a whole lot. But really, at the same time, the biggest thing here is that I expect the minutes to come back to normal here. And that's not really a big concern of mine. I don't see Chesson Randle or McRae, who you're right, came in with about a minute and a half left in the third. I don't see them influencing his playing time, not exactly threatening to take his minutes away. And then let's talk about Beal finally here. What's funny about Bradley Beal is that he has the ceiling, he has the big game upside. Against Atlanta too, he's crushed them. 30.7 rebounds, 6 assists. He's averaging just through 3 games this year. Again, for what it's worth, maybe nothing, but it is worth something against Atlanta because they're so bad and they play at an elevated pace and they really don't have any way of stopping him. But the way I see it is Beal's got a high floor. 40 fantasy points or more in 15 of 17 starts since John Wall went down. It's pretty good, but he's finished with less than 50 points in 12 of 17 of them. So the range of outcomes with Beal really hasn't been where you wanted. The volatility hasn't been crazy. It just kind of comes down to, well, he's facing Atlanta. If there was ever an opportunity to get him where we need him to be, the Hawks are pretty good at helping along that process.
Yeah, I mean, I love Beal here. I have him projected over 50 fantasy points. We know that he plays monster minutes, especially, in competitive games. He can get up over 40. The only thing with Beal is, again, just paying close attention to the ownership, not even comparing him to guys on the Wizards since he's in a
No,
price range by himself
shooting
there.
guard, yeah.
Yeah, right around 9K range where you have Drew, you have Booker, you have Beal. You have a ton of guys on this slate that
And then
if
DeRozan and Russell down
right.
at that mid to high 7K range. It's stacked in that area.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the spot where, if you play this slate every single time for the season and you just are overweight on the lowest owned guys out of that group, you probably come out ahead just because there's not a big difference in ceilings for any of them. So that would be the only thing with Beal, but I still expect to have a ton of him. I think that especially with the DraftKings pricing where they're cheap, I have them capped at a maximum of 4 players, and then I just kind of put in rules so that I don't get more than 2 of like Green, Ariza, Beal. I don't get Green and Bryant together. But with how cheap this team is and how many minutes the starters play, I think it's kind of an exception to what we normally do, and you can really get a lot of these guys in lineups.
I agree. Like them a lot today. And you're really getting price points where they're not hard to get to. Yeah, Beal's up over 9K, but it's not a crazy salary here against the Hawks. Looking at the Hawks, though, John Collins coming off a huge game. It's funny because you and I talk about this a lot. If a guy's playing this many minutes per game, we're not going to go ahead and say, well, he might play this many minutes. He might play 40, he might play 30. Maybe he will, but there's really no point in you or myself talking about it. Now, you did the show on Saturday. Didn't do any NBA content Saturday. So I didn't follow along too much, but he played 39 minutes after we had actually been seeing his minutes come down. He had played 29, 32, 29, 29, 30, 25, 27. We had been seeing a consistent, his minutes consistently dissipating a bit. Played 39 minutes, had a monster game, 35 and 16. Amari Spellman played like 7 minutes in that game. But really, it was the first time John Collins has gotten up there in a long time. And the first time he'd played more than, he played 30 and 32 minutes a couple times, but really, he hadn't played 34 more minutes in almost a month. So it was interesting to see the 39 minutes there.
Yeah, and even if you go back and look through some of his games where he got in foul trouble or the game blew out, he was looking at 30 to 32 minutes in those games. So I'd be lying if I said that I had any idea, exactly how this game's going to play out as far as minutes go. But the fact that we did see the starters or the main players here finally get minutes like they should. I'm going to go ahead and project these guys for towards the upper end of their minutes range. I have Collins at 34 minutes. I have Young at 34, Prince at 32. They're not guys that I think you have to get to in cash games or should get to in cash games because there are just better, less volatile plays on this slate. I mean, if you look at Collins' DraftKings price, he's $100 more than LaMarcus Aldridge. If you end up in that price range in cash, just play Aldridge. But in tournaments, you are going to get an ownership discount most likely on Collins versus Aldridge, and that's worth it because it is a very nice matchup from a rebounding standpoint for Collins. And if those minutes are there, he still can pretty easily outperform his price tag. It's just that the volatility in the minutes and the lack of consistency that we see on a game-to-game basis from Lloyd Pierce in his rotations make these guys really risky in cash games where you really can't afford to have someone shit the bed like you can in tournaments.
Yeah. And against the Suns in that game we just talked about, the bench played a total of 76 minutes, which is way down from what we've seen, right? No one played more than 18 minutes off the bench. Spellman and Carter played 7 and 3 minutes respectively. These guys saw their minutes come down a lot. Now, again, a big thing there is, did this happen because they were playing so well? There were a lot of lead changes in this game. It went back and forth. Or did this happen because Lloyd Pierce is looking to do things a little bit differently? I wish I had the answer for it, but I don't. I do know one thing, that John Collins is good enough to where if he played 32 minutes, it probably isn't going to hurt you. I saw somebody in chat just a moment ago talk about, Collins' career games against Atlanta. I don't know if you are against Washington. Sorry. They haven't been that great. I don't know if that's what he was saying or that they have been good or haven't been good, but keep in mind, Collins, I think in all three of the games he's faced Washington this year, he's been in some form of foul trouble. Uh, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure that he's been in foul trouble in almost all of these games. He's faced them 3 times this year. Yeah, he had 4 in that one, a couple early ones, 4 in that one, a couple early ones. So it is what it is. He's had 4 in all of them, I think. Yeah, I think he's had four
He had
fouls.
5 in the first one.
He had 5 in the first one, then 4 in the other 2. And in the other 2, he had a couple quick early fouls in the first quarter, I believe. But if you actually want to look at, instead of his per game, don't do that. If you want to actually, if you care about how he's done in those games and performance wise or efficiency wise, he's averaging almost 1.5 fantasy points per minute against them this season.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean the only concern I have with Collins is the minutes. It's a
Me
great
too.
spot. I think the FanDuel price tag also is really favorable at 7,600 or $500 less than it is on DraftKings. So that
Right.
makes him really appealing there as well. Just again, more of a tournament play because of the volatility in minutes.
Right, especially where like Kenneth Faried is 8K. Collins is cheaper than Kenneth Faried on FanDuel,
Right.
which is kind of wild. Uh, and then on DraftKings, it's different because he's $1,100 more expensive than Faried. We'll get to that in a bit. But if Collins plays 29, 30 minutes, I'm not going to be happy with it. I can tell you that much. There,
Right.
there is
Definitely not.
still some risk here. But you're getting him, especially on FanDuel, as you noted, at a much better price here. And if he does get back up to 34, 35 minutes, you're probably going to be really satisfied with it. What do you make of the rest of the Hawks team, assuming that, hey, maybe we do get the minutes back up? Trae Young, the game previous to that, and unlike a lot of these other starters, actually has been seeing like 34, 35 minutes per game, or 33, 34 minutes. And then guys like Kevin Huerter, of course, have been getting pretty decent run. But is there anyone else outside of Collins that interests you?
He's gone.
We've been doing so well, Josh.
It really has been going well. It really has.
I get it. He hasn't won a lot of money lately. Can't fix anything.
Don't worry, I'm here. I put myself on screen.
I got you, my man. But he says, guess we were due for that to happen.
All right, I got myself on my
Buy some new shit, man.
I got myself on my beach background. Now I'm good.
There it
Kevin
is.
Huerter,
Wow.
what?
I mean, what Adam said he's going to project these guys to get similar minutes as last game, in the 34 range, which I think is fair. He said he's not going to pretend like he knows what's going to happen. Neither do I. But aside from Collins, do you have any interest in Atlanta? Because there's no question we're going to have a lot of Washington players tonight.
I have an oddly large amount of interest in Kevin Huerter, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, look, you came in at just the right time.
Yeah, evidently. Maybe I should be a little bit more specific. It's not as if I'm like, oh, I'm going to get Kevin Huerter in 80% of my shit today. He's grading out better for me than I would have expected. I did a little digging into game logs and stuff. He's been really solid lately. And this game should be, I know that the Wizards defense has been better, but this should be a relatively up-tempo game that fits him pretty well. He doesn't seem to be garnering, at least in the early ownership, didn't seem to be garnering all that much love. So I like the idea of using him as one of the pay down options at shooting guard.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, like he's at 9% right now. Mikal Bridges is at 16. Kendrick Williams is at 20. Are those guys really that different than each other?
No, man. And Bridges has had a couple solid games, but I'm still not convinced that wasn't a mirage. And just one of the reasons I say that, and hear me out, we'll get to that game in a second, is it's still not like you're seeing his usage increase significantly. He's just been more efficient. And are you going to rely on him shooting 7 for 9 from the field again?
Right.
When he's really struggled to shoot at times this season, especially when his attempts go up, which I'd be happy with, but we haven't seen it. And his last 2 games, he has 7 steals. Those aren't nearly as predictable as you'd like. With certain players, sure, average a steal or 2 per game, but 3 or 4 or 5 steals per game isn't something you're banking on each night.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, like if he's going to be 16 and Williams is going to be 20, I don't need to go to those guys in that sort of volume. I'd rather just have a little bit more Herder. And it's not that I mind getting those guys, but it's a lot in that like sub 5K range of shooting guard types. I can't imagine wanting to like 20% of Kenrich Williams, really? 27%
right?
Frank Jackson, which I get is at 3,700, but really? We're gonna go that crazy on these Peli scrubs?
I do like Kenrich. We can talk about that in a little bit, but
it's not that I disagree with it. I'm just there with it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean Kenrich Williams at that projected ownership right now. The ownership projections, if you are a premium sub on awesemo.com, have been updated. You know, that's pretty high for somebody like him, who I still think he gets his 30 minutes tonight, but you know, he's still Kenrich Williams.
Yeah. And he's a lot different at 3,100 than he is at 4,300.
Sure.
And that's like,
I think on FanDuel, there's a little bit more of an argument to be made because he's got the power forward eligibility. And, you know, while you have a couple guys up top, it's really not that deep of a position. You know, you do have your Bagleys and, you know, like Sabonis and stuff and Green, but nobody that you're just locked and loaded. You know, a lot of guys that I like and I think are great tournament plays. But, and then Aldridge is 9,500. I think you could make a decent argument there. But back to your original point, yeah, when you're getting him up over 20%, then you start to question things.
Yeah, this is a guy that was essentially not an NBA player 2 weeks ago.
Correct.
And now he's 4,900 on FanDuel and 4,300 on DraftKings. Like, I get it. Indiana's still a good defense, whether Victor Oladipo is on the floor or not. This Pelicans team is chock full of dudes that don't belong on an NBA floor.
Crazy. He's
him
rebounding
failing here is not exactly a shock.
No, I hear you. He's rebounding at almost 19% since he took over, or since, you know, half the front court went down. That's a crazy high rate.
Yeah,
Crazy high rate.
Who needs AD then, you know?
Right? I also find it funny that DraftKings has got him at shooting guard and then he's power forward on FanDuel. FanDuel actually has it right, but just pure silliness. I think with players like this, they just take a guess. Like,
as if it's so difficult.
Kenrich Williams sounds like a 2 guard.
Right.
All right. Let's move on here. Detroit and Denver. You got the Pistons as 3.5 point home dogs, a 210 total. I feel like this game is a little bit more difficult for me. First of all, we need to know what's going on with Jamal Murray. He is questionable for this game, but I don't know, man. It's to me, you've got your, you know, Jokic. Oh, and of course, Paul Millsap's also questionable. So there are a few things here that could move, you know, move things a lot. But let's just say Jamal Murray plays.
Okay.
Yes, of course, Jokic is always a quality option. There's no denying that. But we've also got Giannis at right around the same price, James Harden, a few great top price plays today. And then your Blake Griffins and your Drummonds and such, assuming everyone's healthy for this game, are you really getting to a ton of it?
I doubt it. Let's see what I got. I got 5% Blake on my last crunch. I got a similar amount of Andre Drummond, who, you know, is lumped in a group of salary with John Collins and LaMarcus Aldridge, and like Collins is going under-owned. I don't know.
Right.
It's a putrid game from a fantasy perspective. Both teams have the lowest implied totals of everybody, of every team on the slate. This is dead last and second to last. So there's not exactly a lot of fantasy points to be going around to begin with. I mean, if you want to go to Reggie Jackson on DK at 5,200, have at it. Otherwise, I'm not super excited about it.
Yeah, I agree. If Millsap is out, I think we get really good playing time from Mason Plumlee, right? Because you're talking about going up against, you know, one of the bigger front courts in the league in Drummond and Griffin. We've seen a lot of coaches just this season alone really even adjust starting lineups to match up against this Detroit starting lineup, kind of just to be able to curtail their production a bit. If Millsap is out, Mason Plumlee really does slide into there and fit beautifully. You know, you'd love to get him starting at the 5 instead of the 4, especially somebody of his size. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Plumlee get upwards of 30 minutes in this game. So, look, if Millsap's out, then I think we have an entirely different situation. But we don't have that information yet. And if Murray's out, Monty Morris, that price is up. He's been very good though. There's no denying he's looked really good in terms of his facilitating responsibilities. Touches per game over those last 2 starts, he leads the team ahead of Nikola Jokic. That's crazy. So he's not just standing around. He is getting a lot of work. He is initiating the offense, and I think that's important. But do you get up to him even if Murray's out against Detroit on a day where we're through one game and we've talked about a couple guards that we like already, and there's so many more to get to?
Yeah, I can't imagine having much of Murray if he's playing. We're getting really lucky that now Laffy's gone. Jesus, can I do a show with anybody here? Nobody's on screen.
Anywhere.
Just me. There's Josh on the deeper dive.
Come on, man. And because I got the AirPods in, not gauges for whoever.
Yeah.
Remember that everyone thought I had gauges in, thought I was like the lone goth DFS player. Got the AirPods. I could walk downstairs to grab myself a water and I wouldn't miss a word. I got you, man.
Denver. So we're getting really lucky that they play at 7:00 because this is like the only thing that's up in the air right now. And Murray and or Millsap being out is a dramatic swing for the Nuggets. So thank God we should be able to get that sort of news before 7:00. I'm hoping that Millsap doesn't play just to open up a little bit more value on the site. I'll be playing Plumlee for sure at 4,100. That's kind of a no-brainer with his previous fantasy pedigree of, 1.1 fantasy points per minute, something in that neighborhood. If Murray sits, feel free to go back to the Monty Morris well. Malik Beasley looks fine, particularly on FanDuel.
And Harris is already out.
Yeah. It makes the decision process a little bit easier.
Oh, here we go. Look at, you know what? Sometimes on the deeper dive, we just get lucky. Jamal Murray, unlikely to play. So
there you go.
There you have it. Gary Harris is out. Maybe we'll get some Millsap news. Mike, I have a feeling he's going to be a game time decision. But
yeah, Morris, Beasley, Barton.
Yep.
I'm fine with all three of those guys. They're all much better on FanDuel than they are on DraftKings, but that's not to stop me here. The one guy that I don't have a ton of interest in on DraftKings would be Torrey Craig. This strikes me as a spot where Torrey Craig doesn't get as many minutes as the rest of the guys because the Pistons don't have a natural guy for him to want to guard over 35 minutes. So it feels like more of a Malik Beasley day than anything else.
Agreed. And I would also caution Malik Beasley on FanDuel. I think you're perfectly fine there. Right? 4,900 shooting guard. Yeah, you don't need to. Shooting guards got plenty of good spots anyway. But the one thing I would caution with Beasley is, be careful when you're just perusing what they've done in terms of fantasy points and look a little deeper into it. I mean, Josh, his shooting recently has been so lights out that could come crashing down quickly. I'm not saying the guy's a poor shooter, but he shot above 50% in 6 straight games, above 64% in 3 straight games. And his 3-point shooting has been, undeniably unsustainable. So when he's not racking up the points, he's not going to get it done with rebounds and assists. So with Malik Beasley, you have to hope that wave doesn't crash and that you can ride it for one more game because he's going to need to keep shooting 60-70% to get the job done.
Which is obviously going to continue to happen.
Of course it will, because I just said that it probably won't.
Oh, somebody back?
Oh yeah, I've been listening to you guys talk about the Nuggets.
Oh, hey guy, glad you returned.
Yeah.
Josh,
that hadn't happened in a while.
Yeah, we had said we were doing so well. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got 4 more games after this, Adam. But Josh and I pretty much gave our breakdown of both sides of this game. Jamal Murray's unlikely to play. We're waiting on Millsap. If he's out, I would expect Plumlee to get a lot of minutes in this specific matchup against Detroit. Go ahead and give your take on it, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so I mean, if Millsap sits, then I expect I'll have close to 100% Plumlee on DraftKings since I can roster him at forward and center. I think even if Millsap plays, that you maybe see a couple of extra minutes for Plumlee because of the matchup. Like you said, it's a spot where it's going to be real easy for Malone to play him alongside Jokic, which he likes to do anyway. But if Millsap sits, I think that he becomes the top value play on the slate. With Murray out, obviously more minutes for Morris. It helps to solidify Beasley's minutes as well. The price tags on those guys have come up to where I agree with you and Josh that, they're fine plays, but they're certainly not guys you have to just jam into your lineup like you did before. Beasley's price tag on FanDuel is way too cheap, but the opportunity cost is still through the roof, like you said. So it's really Plumlee for me if Millsap sits, and not a whole lot of interest if Millsap plays.
Uzi
Other,
asks, is
other than
Barton
Jokic.
Uzi asks, is Barton good for tournaments on FanDuel? I mean,
Yes.
he's fifth. What's that?
I said yes.
Yeah, he's $5,400. So you could certainly do worse than that, right? And I'm just curious, like, if Beasley or Morris don't come out of the gate on fire like they have recently, do we see their minutes, throttled a little bit? It's definitely possible. But I do think Josh had a good point in that Torrey Craig, you could see a less effective or less minutes here just because, who do you really have him out there guarding? And that's one of the main reasons that you're playing him. It's an interesting game, but I don't think right now I'm getting to a whole lot. The Paul Millsap news could make a big difference in how lineups are constructed when it comes to Mason Plumlee.
Yeah, for sure. If Millsap's in, Jokic is really the only guy that I'm interested in having a lot of on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I do think Barton's a really, really good play at 5,400.
So you do like Jokic a lot?
Yeah.
Okay. Brooklyn and Milwaukee. We've got the Brooklyn Nets hosting the Bucks here, 7-point dogs, 230 total. Pretty interesting, man. When you look at pace of play and a lot of these things, and you don't zoom in as the season goes on, sometimes you miss things, Adam. And what I'm talking about here is if you look at the last 30 days, this is a Brooklyn team that, mind you, over the first 2 months of the season, they were over the first 2 months or so of the season. By the way, Taurean Prince will remain in the starting lineup today. But over the first 2 months of the season, they were playing at a bottom 10 pace. Over the last 30 days, the Brooklyn Nets lead the entire league in pace. Milwaukee playing at the fourth fastest pace. Now, Milwaukee has the league best defensive rating over that span, and Brooklyn hasn't exactly been great, but they haven't been terrible. I think they are somewhere in the middle.
They're second.
No, sorry, they're second.
Yeah.
Second. Second. I get mixed up when I write articles. Certain teams start to all blend together.
Yeah.
But you know how it is. You got two teams that are playing really well defensively, but two teams that are leading the league in pace over the last 30 days. Really an interesting game here. Jared Allen is the cheapest he's been on FanDuel since opening night. He's the cheapest he's been on DraftKings since November 4th. So you have that. You have D'Angelo Russell sub 8K on DraftKings. And then you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's 2,200 cheaper than Harden at a lesser position on FanDuel, 2,000 cheaper than Harden on DraftKings, and facing a Brooklyn team that allows the fifth most points in the paint. I don't see any way. I don't care if Rondae Hollis Jefferson's active, any of this. This is a really, really favorable spot for Giannis, and I've actually come around more on him throughout the day after doing the Early Bird podcast. But I will point out, of course, that right now on FanDuel and DraftKings, he's projected to have the second highest ownership behind only Frank Jackson.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like the spot a lot for Giannis as well. A good rebounding matchup. Brooklyn's been playing better defensively, but Giannis is matchup proof. It doesn't really matter. And I think the pace more than makes up for that. With Giannis, I mean, on a permanent basis, he's been one of the best players in the league all season long. The issue is just Milwaukee is just so good that the games where Giannis actually gets his, 36 minutes are pretty few and far between. So, I mean, not going to project that they blow this team out. It's just a legitimate risk with Giannis is, that Milwaukee is so good offensively and defensively. They just run away from a lot of teams, especially the Eastern Conference teams. So that's kind of a built-in risk, but that's also why his price tag is as low as it is. If we were consistently getting 36 minutes a night from Giannis, you'd be talking about him consistently getting 60 plus fantasy points, and that price tag would be higher. So I like him a lot. The issue, and you mentioned it, is just the ownership on a slate where there are guys that you can pivot to. If Jokic is going to be lower owned, I think that they're very similar in terms of upside, and I don't mind having a little bit more Jokic than Giannis at lower ownership. You can even get up to Harden depending on what kind of value opens up at lower ownership. So on a point per dollar basis, I love Giannis. It just comes down to ownership in tournaments.
Fake AirPods. Get that shit out of here, bro. Get that shit out of here, man. Fake AirPods. These are the real deal, my dude. I don't have the case on me. Now you're really gonna think they're fake. Um, something interesting about Giannis is because Harden's been so good, you kind of like forget about how good Giannis has been because he hasn't really been at the forefront of the conversation. Since Chris Paul went down, right, like a month plus ago, Harden is posting like 80 plus fantasy points every other night. But over that span, Giannis still has a 33% usage rate, 19% rebounding rate, 28% assist rate, and 1.7 fantasy points per minute, Adam. Like, Harden's been so good that Giannis's 1.7 fantasy points per minute seems so much less appealing when Chris Paul is hurt because he isn't playing 40 minutes every night and he isn't giving you 80 fantasy points every single night. It's crazy how it works when Harden's playing that well.
Right. Yeah, and it's just the minutes for Giannis. I mean, there are so many games where he just gets he gets fewer minutes than he could, and that's really what holds him back.
Brooklyn just doesn't have the rim protection here. They get burned in the paint, and it's not like Brook Lopez is going to be bodying Jared Allen down low. No, it's Giannis's job, and I expect to see a lot of that tonight. I really do like him today. What else for Milwaukee for you? Any Bledsoe interest or Middleton? Anybody else outside of Giannis that you like a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think those guys are all kind of underpriced. Bledsoe's averaged 1.2 fantasy points per minute over the last month. He's probable to play after missing the last game with, I believe, an Achilles injury. Still sub 7K on DraftKings, only 7,300 on FanDuel. I think he's a perfectly fine play. Middleton is, whatever, plays 33, 34 minutes, probably doesn't kill you, probably doesn't win you anything. That's kind of how he is. And then, Brogdon's price tag kind of slowly coming up. The problem with Brogdon is just like I have Satoransky projected way higher than him. There are just plays that I like more. So it's not so much that I dislike Brogdon. It's just that there are guys in that price range that I like a lot better.
Me too. And then with Brook Lopez, I'm sure there's a fine spot, but it's not exactly the like with Lopez, the Brooklyn Nets. I'd prefer centers that can get work done around the basket. Yeah, they struggle against centers, but outside of having their shot blocked a lot, it's not really the matchup that Lopez exploits. Could he have a fine game? Sure, and he's a decent price, but I'm not necessarily getting my hopes up here. I think he's perfectly reasonable, and we've seen some pretty solid production out of Lopez, but it's not a lot of centers benefit more than a guy like Lopez does in this spot. Brooklyn, on the other hand, well, we're still waiting, first of all, on the news out of Brooklyn with Joe Harris. I'm interested to see what they do, what Atkinson does in terms of trying to limit Antetokounmpo, because the only other time they faced each other this season, that was actually the game that Rondae Hollis-Jefferson got hurt after a couple minutes. Damari Carroll ended up playing 35 minutes in that game, Adam. This will be an interesting situation, and if Harris is out, I don't know, maybe Carroll gets back over the 30-minute mark. What are we doing with Brooklyn?
Yeah, I mean, if Harris is out, I think that it benefits Carroll and it benefits Hollis Jefferson because you can slide Carroll up a spot, you can get Hollis Jefferson more minutes, and now you have more length out there to defend this, very long Milwaukee team. So it would be interesting if Harris sits. If Harris is in, it just still gets kind of difficult to get enough minutes to want to play Carroll or to want to play Hollis Jefferson. You would have to basically take minutes away from Grant and give them to Carroll at the 3 to make it work. So if we assume Harris is in, I like D'Angelo Russell, especially on DraftKings at only 7,900. The price tag finally on its way back down. We know that he has the really high ceiling, but I just prefer rostering him as the price tag comes down because it's on a point per dollar standpoint, it's always tough to get to Russell at $8,500 because he just doesn't play as many minutes as guys in that price range like Holiday or Beal. He's still on a Kenny Atkinson coach team where on any given night he can play 27 minutes because he doesn't go 100% for a 50-50 ball or something like that. So there's just a little bit more risk than in those expensive shooting guards. But when you get him a little bit cheaper, even though it's a tough matchup defensively, I think the pace obviously works in his favor. And we've just seen him, kind of take apart multiple good defenses this year. He's played really, really well. He has a 32% usage rate over the last month without Dinwiddie on the floor, almost a 40% assist percentage. I think that he's a really good play, especially on DraftKings.
Yep, so do I. And while we'll talk about DeRozan as well, Russell's just, the truth is, recently been more productive. I don't know if DeRozan's still dealing with some type of injury or whatever. look, Russell's one of those guys we talk about. I was talking about Beal where the volatility really isn't that much. Russell's volatile, right? No question. Like you look at his last 10 games, he's got 50 plus fantasy points in 5 of them, and he's averaging 33 in the other 5. He faces a tough defense, but this is going to be a back and forth, fast-paced affair. Another thing, too, no team actually allows more three-point attempts to opponents than Milwaukee on the season. So I think he's going to get up plenty of shots here. Not worried about the volume whatsoever. And you're getting kind of a built-in discount on DraftKings at 7,900 anyway, Adam. We talked earlier in recent weeks, recent days about him being priced at his ceiling. Well, sub 8K is not really priced at his ceiling anymore, especially when he's playing well. You're getting upwards of 35, 36 minutes from D'Angelo Russell, which could, come into play tonight.
Yeah, and we're 2 for 2. Joe Harris just ruled out.
Look at that. We're a business, man. Sometimes we get lucky here on the deeper dive. So I do think if you need depth at small forward, Damari Carroll's fine. And he's, mid 4K price point. I expect him to play around 30, 31 minutes. And while he's not your greatest per minute guy, you don't have to pay all that much for him either. Anything else you want to talk about here, Jared Allen? If you want to add anything on Allen, who is, as I said, the cheapest he's been in a very, very long time.
Yeah, I mean, I think Allen's a perfectly fine play. It's a pretty good center position again today, but there's no doubt that he has upside at that price point. I do want to throw Hollis Jefferson into the conversation, though. I think Harris being out really has a positive impact on him because of this matchup. Like, it would make a lot of sense for him to jump into the starting lineup here. And if that's the case, I think you probably get, 20 minutes from him.
I agree. I think him and Carroll both get good run in this game.
Yep, I agree.
And while it may not seem like much, Jared Dudley's also out, and he was getting decent run up until he got hurt. So you have no Dudley, who's been out, of course, and no Joe Harris, who'd been playing, 28 to 32 minutes per game. Some decent minutes that you're going to need to fill. All right, let's talk New Orleans, Indiana. We've got, I'll just break this down quickly. Indiana 3-point road favorites, 218 total. We are without Julius Randle, Anthony Davis, Elfrid Payton, Nikola Mirotic, Etuan Moore. We've got Drew Holiday, Frank Jackson, Kenrich Williams, Darius Miller, Solomon Hill, Jahlil Okafor. I find it interesting, and yes, I'm going to start with this. With Kenrich Williams, he's played 30 minutes in 3 straight games since all of these guys were out together. Not only is he playing really well, Adam, rebounding at an extremely high clip, 18.6% over a fantasy point per minute in that span. He has a plus minus of plus 8 over that span. It might not seem like much, but the Pelicans have played poorly. Solomon Hill's minus 21. And the reason I mention that is Hill's been getting starts, and then he's playing 11 minutes in the game, 18 minutes in the game. Kenrich Williams is getting a lot of work off the bench. He's been the first guy off the bench. And he's actually not hurting this basketball team. He is expected to have some serious ownership on this slate, though. It looks like it's come down a little bit. What do you make of Kenrich Williams here off the bench for the New Orleans Pelicans?
I don't mind the price tag, but if he's projected for high ownership, I am pretty confident I'll be coming in like at or below the field, just because I don't buy in. Like, the price tags come up enough to where, if he goes out there and gets you like 24 fantasy points, it's not really helping you win anything anymore. And I just don't buy into this guy being like a point per minute producer or anything like that.
Or rebounding at damn near 20%.
Right. And, he hustles. He gets hustle boards.
Very hard.
He is someone that I think continues to get minutes. Like, I'm not concerned about that. It's just that he's the exact type of guy that, he can string together games like he has, but it's just not going to be that consistent, I don't think. And when people are paying for past performance, I just will go elsewhere, especially on this slate where there's a lot of guys in that price range that aren't particularly good, but there's a lot. And so it's pretty unlikely that he's actually the highest scoring, $4,400 guy on the slate. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say that, before I had thought that his ownership would be that high, I did actually have a decent amount of interest in Kenrich Williams. But I am with you here that if he is that popular, and by popular, like 17, 20%, that's tough to get to, man. It really is. Indiana defensively isn't a terrible team. And the biggest thing, though, I just think there's enough alternative value now to where you don't have to force him in just because he's going to have some ownership.
Right. Like I did a crunch before the show for DraftKings, and I got him at like 12%. Yeah, and that was factoring in our projected ownership and everything. And like I'd be fine getting there. It's just I don't think I'm getting up to like 20, especially with Harris out now and assuming that opens up minutes for Hollis
Right.
Jefferson.
Right. In a super fast paced game,
Right.
nonetheless. I do still like Drew. I get it. He hasn't been great recently, but you're still talking about a guy that's playing next to Frank Jackson, Solomon Hill, Kenrich Williams, Darius Miller, Like Holiday's the only real basketball player on this team right now. I still have interest. 8,700 on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel. That big game is coming for Drew. There's no reason it shouldn't. So I like him. Look, Frank Jackson's going to be popular, but rightfully so. I expect to see another 30-plus minutes out of him. We'll get your take on the backcourt situation with Tim Frazier. Let's talk about Holiday, Frazier, and Jackson here.
Yeah, I mean, Holiday, I think, is perfectly fine, averaging about 1.3 fantasy points per minute without Davis, Peyton, Mirotic, whoever else,
wow.
Randall. Yeah, Randall on the floor this year. 27% usage, 33% assist percentage. I think he's a perfectly fine option. It's not the most appealing matchup against an Indiana team that's not particularly fast, that is still pretty decent defensively, even without Oladipo. So when you compare him to like a Bradley Beal against, Atlanta, or Devin Booker against Houston, it starts to get a little bit tough, but I don't have a problem there. I like Okafor as well. I think the price tag just hasn't come up enough. You probably get 32 to 34 minutes out of him again, barring foul trouble here. Those are the two that I'm most interested in from New Orleans, obviously. Then you get to guys like Miller and Kenrich Williams, where I think that they're perfectly fine point per dollar plays. It's just that if people are going to chase past performances, I think there are enough pivots on the slate where I'll probably be underweight. Frank Jackson's price tag is cheap enough where it's really hard for him to really disappoint. 42 minutes last game. I'm obviously not projecting that. I'm at like 32 right now.
So
I think it could go. Yeah, I think it could go. Yeah, like a little bit more, a little bit less, but seems like a pretty decent, mid-range projection there. I did think that it was interesting. He played a bunch of minutes next to Tim Frazier last game. This is a matchup against Indiana where we could absolutely see that again, where you have a bunch of Collison and Corey Joseph playing alongside each other. It will be pretty easy for Frazier and Jackson to play together. So I have Frazier at 24 minutes. I have Jackson at 32. I think that if there's a big ownership gap, that, going to Frazier isn't the craziest thing in the world. But,
I don't think it's crazy at all, because Frank Jackson has been entirely dependent on scoring, right? Just because you might see that he gets a start at the point does not mean that he's actually handling the rock all that often, because he hasn't been, right? You're not going to see the assists out of him that you'd like. He's not going to be racking up 6-7 rebounds every game. Meanwhile, Tim Frazier is actually getting some of the distributing work. Assist totals have been through the roof. I wouldn't be surprised to see Frazier outproduce Jackson. The big thing there is simply, can he get enough minutes to make it worthwhile?
Right.
I like Miles Turner quite a bit on the other side of this game against this Pelicans front court. I just he blocks enough shots, he gets enough peripherals to where his not so great rebounding is mitigated. But since Davis and Randall went out, this is one of the worst, bottom 2, bottom 3 rebounding teams in the league. I could see Turner having a very solid game here. He's also seen his minutes come up recently. Turner's price point to me is very appealing. What are you doing with the Pacers?
I like the whole team, but I'm with you. I like Turner quite a bit. The price point is appealing. The minutes have been nice. It's a really nice matchup. Sabonis at 5,500 on DraftKings, I think, is too cheap as well. Obviously, you don't want to play them alongside each other, because for Sabonis to really maximize his minutes, it means that Turner got in foul trouble or something. But even in 24 minutes, I think Sabonis is a pretty good play at 5,500. Thad Young at 5,800 is a good play. I like Bogdanovich. I like Collison. Like Doug McDermott being out, obviously, isn't something that seems like a big deal, but it does open up more minutes here. I don't want to play a bunch of these guys in the same lineup, like Bogdanovich, Young, Collison, but I think at least one of them probably has a big game here, and then I like the centers as well.
I'm with you. Sabonis and Turner talked about both of them in today's deep dive, realizing now that I also wrote up Bojan Bogdanovich. It's just a really depleted Pelicans team, and Bogdanovich not only seeing a ton of minutes, but the opportunity will be there, playing with a lot of very low usage players. And when that's the case, there's always going to be opportunity. You're talking Tyreek Evans played 16 minutes off the bench, had shot 0 for 7. He's just been god awful with Oladipo out. They don't use him properly, and until they do, you're not going to get any decent production from him. And he's really not going to take away from anybody else on this team. So Bogdanovich, to me, a really interesting play. Collison's fine. I don't know how much I get to him now that his price has come up, but I don't have any issue with it. 40% assist rate with Oladipo off the floor. Well, Oladipo and Evans, actually. I don't know what it is with just Oladipo.
It's like 37.1.
So there you go. Yeah. But Turner, Sabonis, and Bogdanovich are the guys that I like most here. Let's move on to Phoenix. We got to kind of hurry up since your internet cut out on us. Phoenix and Houston. Let's talk about this one. The Suns are 8.5-point dogs at home, 227.5 total. I'll throw it to you. Give me your take initially on James Harden.
I'm actually getting a pretty healthy amount of him. It's obviously a really good matchup. Still expect him to play around 38 minutes. I figure that about half of his minutes will come without Chris Paul on the floor. The other half will come alongside him. And if you average that out, it gets him to about a 43% usage rate, 34.5% assist percentage, and 12.5% rebounding percentage. So I have him at like 71 DraftKings points, which for context is a few more points than I have Giannis. So the price difference is obviously pretty big. But if we get like Millsap ruled out, and we get even more value there. I like getting the Harden in this spot because, especially at relatively low projected ownership.
I just think he's pretty easy to play, especially on DraftKings.
Yep.
Yeah, it's easy to get to him. It's not tough at all. Eric Gordon is out, by the way. Take that for what it's worth. Not a guy that I really have much interest in playing ever, especially with Chris Paul and Harden healthy. Chris Paul's 6,600 on DraftKings. I expect him to get over 30 minutes today. What do you make of CP3 now that he's back?
I love that DraftKings price tag. I have him projected for exactly 30 minutes. And even then I'm getting him at, like 38.5 DraftKings points, which makes him a really good play there. Obviously there's the potential for him to get to like 32 or 33, but yeah, I like him a lot. I don't plan on playing him in the same lineup as Harden, since Harden is still expensive enough that you really need him to take over the game. But as in separate lineups, I really like Paul.
And for what it's worth, I still see Harden playing about 15, 16 minutes with Paul off the court, even if he's up to 30 minutes. So that's good for both of them. They will see some pretty significant staggering of the minutes here. We're running out of time. We'll get through everything. We won't short you guys. But I do want to point out, by the way, if you want half off Awesemo.com subscription, all you have to do is use the promo code Deeper Dive. You get 50% off your first month. We'd love to see you over there. A ton of content behind paywall. A lot of great stuff. And if you have any questions, you can hit any of us up after the show. With Kenneth Faried, man, he's still a 1.15 fantasy point per minute guy. He's facing a really rough front court. I think he gets back up over 30 minutes. He fouled out last game, still had 16 and 13 or whatever. Faried at 7K on DraftKings, I'm still interested in. And on the other side, I like DeAndre Ayton as well. Give me your roundup of the rest of this game. I've given you mine. And of course, Booker, but I'll let you close this out.
Yeah, I think Faried's fine. I'm not really getting to a lot of him. I have him projected at 32 minutes. Just 32 minutes, 36 DraftKings points. It's just not getting me a ton of him on this slate, but I wouldn't talk anyone off of it because it is a great spot. From the Phoenix side, I love Devin Booker. I love DeAndre Ayton. And then everyone else, Jackson, Oubre, Bridges, they're all like secondary plays for me where I don't have a problem with them, but there's just guys around them I like more. But Booker, last I saw, our ownership was projected to be much lower owned than guys like Beal and Holiday around him. I think he has as much upside as any of those guys, almost a 34% usage rate without TJ Warren on the floor and should play huge minutes. So I like him a lot. And then Ayton played 33 minutes in his first game back. He's in a great spot here against a Houston team that's been terrible rebounding since Capella went down. So I like him quite a bit at a pretty inexpensive price tag.
All right. Yeah, Ayton is one of the guys I like quite a bit here. He jumped right back into the starting lineup with 33 minutes in his first game back from a 2-week hiatus. And of course, Booker should go pretty overlooked here, which I like quite a bit. Not a terrible game. And I wouldn't project a blowout here. You really don't know what's going to happen. Close it out with San Antonio and the Kings, 229.5 total. Spurs 2-point favorites. Aldridge is 8K on DraftKings. DeRozan sub 8K on FanDuel and DraftKings. No Derek White. I don't know if you've looked at it. We don't have much time, so I'll let you run with this. I don't know if you've looked at it, but over the last month, DeRozan's numbers with Derek White off the court are startlingly better than with him on the court. Who would have thought?
Yeah, I had actually looked at his numbers with Gay and Aldridge on since the start of December, and he only has a 23% usage rate, averaging 0.9 fantasy points per minute. White being off should give him some extra assist opportunities, though. If not a little bit more usage. So I think it's a little bit better spot for DeRozan than it would be if White were playing. I'm still not getting a ton of him at a stacked position here, but it's a pretty fair price tag. I love Aldridge's price on DraftKings at 8K. Like I said, I'd play him over Collins in cash games if I'm in that price range. In tournaments, I don't mind taking the pivot to Collins, but I really like the spot for Aldridge. And then the rest of this team, you're kind of just waiting on the starting lineup. I'm expecting it to be Forbes, DeRozan, Gay, Aldridge, and Gasol against this bigger Sacramento team without White. And then Mills getting, backup point guard minutes, a couple extra minutes for Forbes, a couple extra minutes for Bellinelli. All three of those guys become reasonable punts, not guys that I'm getting tons of, but, perfectly fine at around $4,000.
Right. And Aldridge will still get plenty of minutes at the 5, I would expect.
Right. Yep.
With the Kings, I didn't get to a ton. I know that some of the prices are pretty solid, but man, this slate for only having 6 games offers so much at so many of these other games. Maybe you're different than me, though. Close us out with the Kings here.
Yeah, I mean, I like the price tags on guys, but I'm with you. I wasn't getting a ton. I think Bagley was the guy that I got to the most. I have him projected at 28 minutes, only 5,500 on DraftKings. I was getting him.
Can I just say, I'm sorry. I just want to say this one thing. Remember on Friday, I'm like, until Bagley starts getting upwards of 29, 30 minutes consistently, I don't want to. And then he plays 28 and 33 minutes and closes out the game against the Sixers. So if that's the case and he's overtaking Bjelica, then Bagley becomes a really good play in this price range.
Yeah, him, Cauley-Stein, Fox, I think all underpriced, especially Bagley and Cauley-Stein. Not getting a ton, like I said, because there are just so many other good plays on the slate, but I do like them.
All right. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us as always. Thanks for dealing with our technical difficulties. We will be back tomorrow on the Deeper Dive. Stick around. Live Before Lock coming up right after us, taking you up till 7 p.m. Eastern time. Today is Eddie and Josh. And hey, if you appreciate the content, if you want to see more, we would really appreciate it if you hit us with a thumbs up, hit that like button. It really helps us out a lot. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you always know when content's dropping next. Until next time, good luck. Good luck, gamers. We'll see you back here on Wednesday. Or Tuesday.